Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to be doing Bookworm Adventure Girl's original tag, the Atwood Adventure Tag. She tagged me in the original video. It's been a little bit long time coming. Sorry for that, but I'm finally here. It was light out, even though it's going down now. Hopefully it'll come back. It's only 1:30 here, so I hope to get some more sun. Otherwise, I guess you'll just have to live with me doing the tag in darkness. Prompts. 1. Before publishing her first collection of poetry in the early 60s, Margaret Atwood had several other jobs, including working at summer camps. What was your first job? My first job was working at Co-op, which is a grocery store, as a bag boy. I did that for probably a year or so, I want to say, and I was 17, I think. While growing up, Margaret Atwood's family spent several months each year living in the bush in northern Ontario. What is a survival skill that you have that would help you survive living off the grid? I mean, I can cook, I can fish for the most part, but I think all of my fishing revolves around me being able to access a fishing, like a tackle store, so I don't know. I did used to live on a reserve for 2 years, and we would go out in the bush for a while, so I'm fairly certain I could build a rudimentary structure for warmth in the winter. Otherwise, I think that's about it. Margaret Atwood grew up reading comic books. Do you have a favorite comic book or comic book character? Yes. My perfunctory answer is Sandman behind me. Every video you see it, and Dream is probably my favorite character, but the one that you don't know about probably is Unwritten. There's a character called Tom Taylor in this that is sort of a parody on Harry Potter. This book is, at least in the beginning, about a father who has written a Harry Potter-like series of books for children and young adults. But what it becomes about later on is story itself, and it sort of interrogates the notions of the heroic journey, about the more interesting aspects of the cultural gestalt, about those who consume story and those who remember stories, and what kind of power and significance that has in society, and what magic would then look like if that were the case. It is meta, postmodern as heck, very interesting stuff. I'm going to reread it quite soon because I have an itch for it, but I have all the singles and I have this first deluxe edition, which came out and then they never put it out again because they're freaking Vertigo / DC morons in the case of omnibuses and absolutes. Margaret Atwood is not only a poet and author, she has also illustrated books and shown her creativity in so many other ways. What are some ways that you are creative? The only way I'm creative that I know of anyway is my ability to design and write tabletop role-playing games. I have put out 6 or 7 games, 4 of which I think are cyberpunk. Uncanny Echoes is a emergent game about urban fantasy surrealism, in which every single game that you play is a different one-shot game set in the same world, and every time you play the game you're doing world building based on a whole bunch of different stuff that I like. The first one is based on the Town movie, so you're doing a heist. There's another one where it's based on The Order, where you're a group of secretive priests that are doing exorcisms. There's another one that's based on the X-Files episode where Mulder and Scully insinuate themselves into a cul-de-sac town to try to catch a killer, and it becomes very uncanny, and you're the neighbors trying to figure out this mystery, essentially. Stuff like that. So I think I've been fairly eclectic and creative in my work life, but I don't paint or draw or anything like that. I think it's my only creative outlet that I can think of. Some of Margaret Atwood's writing is inspired by myths, folktales, and fairy tales. What is your favorite myth, folktale, or fairy tale, and why? I don't really have one, but I do really love the new translation of Beowulf by Headley. This was a fantastic read, and I thought very smart because it takes something very traditional, localizes it for modern day speech. It's very funny, very intense, and it manages to like really balance masculine and feminine. The story itself, I think, is really good, and the way that she translated it makes it really conducive to the spoken word, just like the original. I think it's really kind of like subversively genius to do something like this, because most works are translated so that they're timeless, right? So that the verbiage, the diction will resonate generally no matter when you read it, whereas this is so contemporary it might become like a modern classic for the sake of it being situated in the time period that it is. Like I said, genius. Margaret Atwood's most well-known novel is The Handmaid's Tale. What is a task or chore you wish you had a maid or servant for? Well, if I had money and I could pay a living wage, honestly, every aspect of cleaning I hate, but definitely not cooking because I really like doing that. So I guess just like the overall daily maintenance of house. Like, this place generates so much dust, it's wild. It's a townhouse, but somehow I have to dust like every couple days. There's so much dust that accrues. I don't know where it comes from. I'm just one person. The themes Margaret Atwood writes about have stayed consistent in all her writing for over 6 decades. She writes about the role of men and women in society, relationships, religion, marriage, and identity, to name a few. If Atwood were to write a novel about you, what are some themes she would need to include? It would be nice to get a sort of updated version of trauma and the trauma cycle. If you know anything about my favorites, it generally has to do with trauma, because it resonates with me in a lot of different ways. Memory is definitely a huge thing with me now. As I've gotten older, I've gone from the kind of typical young person of thinking that memory is like infallible and my memory is perfect and all of that, to the malleability and the ways in which our motivated thinking changes our memory or invents memory wholesale. All of that kind of stuff has been fascinating from the time that I've learned about it in like mid-20s to now. And lastly, probably like toxic masculinity. The story of my life from a young man to now is definitely about toxic masculinity and revolves around insecurity from not knowing my real dad. So I guess that would be like quite pivotal. And that's it, I think. That's all I can think of. Margaret Atwood has created words for her novels. She has talked about how this makes it difficult for translators of her work. Do you have a favorite word? Why is it your favorite? I have a favorite word, but it's stupid. My favorite word is rectory, because I just can't get it out of my head. And the reason for that is because I watched Keeping the Faith a while ago, a movie with Ben Stiller, Edward Norton, Jenna Elfman, I believe. And Jenna Elfman's character in it, who I can't remember the name of, talked about how rectory sounds like a dirty word, but it isn't. And I thought that was very funny, and apparently made a big impact, because 20 years later, it's still in my head. Margaret Atwood was born in Canada and lives in Canada now, but she has also lived in other countries like the United States, England, France, Germany, and Scotland. What countries have you lived in, and or what is another country you would like to live in? I have only lived in Canada, and I've lived all over Canada. I think there's maybe 2 provinces I haven't been a resident of. Where would I like to live? These days, probably like New Zealand with how they handled the lockdown, or Finland with how they handle politicians, something like that. Margaret Atwood is an advocate for caring for the earth. What is something you do to help take care of our planet? It's mandatory to do recycling, so I don't feel like that is a cookie. But I do that. But In terms of ethical consumption under capitalism, I'm not super sure I'm completely on board with that. It feels a lot like putting the onus on individuals versus the shift that we need, where we need to hold companies and governments responsible for what's happening to the environment versus individuals. Yes, if we all change the way that we consume things and demand packaging in different ways, that would be helpful in some ways, but right now I think we're in crisis mode and we're a little bit past that as far as I can see. Margaret Atwood is passionate about animal rights, and some of her writing has included animals and reflections on animals. What is a topic that you are passionate about? Tabletop role-playing games comes to mind. I could only speak to a few people about it. There's not that many people interested in it, although that's changing. I mean, Hasbro is now a company that primarily is the most lucrative aspect of it is Dungeons and Dragons. So it is now effectively a tabletop company with a subsidiary toys, which is wild. I never thought that would happen. Books in general. I like talking about movies, vinyl. Margaret Atwood is supportive of new authors in a variety of ways. Who is a newer author and or what debut novel do you wish more people knew about? I think I've harped on about this a couple times now, but Effect by Charlene Ellesby and her other book, Psychros, which is behind me but you can't see it. She's doing some really interesting stuff. This book is very inventive, fairly unconventional in terms of voice structure with the philosophy. I really loved it. Her characters are all sort of like realistic but unhinged, reflecting aspects of society or philosophy. And then lastly is to tag people. So I will do Sean the Book Maniac, Kim at Middle of the Book March. Was Bob tagged in this? I'm not sure. Bob, if you haven't been tagged, you should be tagged. Bookish, I think, has already done this. Scallydandling about the books. I think this would be a fun one for you. Gunpowder, Fiction, and Plot, if they haven't been tagged. Gem of Books. Jennifer Loves Books. Rosie Cockshed. Larry Has Opinions. And Apocalypse Reading. I'll tag those people. I think some of them have already been tagged, but if you're not, then it just means you need to hurry up.